Everyone. So we feel like we're back in some sort of Groundhog Day scenario with COVID definitely not done, as other people would suggest maybe, and as we see the great British public going about their daily business. So the context for us is that we have seen, since we came back from half term, a very steady increase in the number of positive cases and an increase in the number of schools who are having outbreaks. Not the huge numbers that we saw with Omicron just after Christmas, but you guys will know that it is significant enough again to start impacting on both staff, pupil attendance. So the latest data for our area in Bradford up to the 17th of March, and I suspect we will already be on these numbers, the rate was 328 people per 100,000, which was up from 206 the week before, so quite a significant increase. And colleagues no doubt will have seen the data that was widely published at the beginning of this week, which was the DfE attendance data. That was down from whole school attendance was down from 92.2% to 89.7%, which pretty much puts us back at quite significant absence rates, again, as you guys are experiencing, and a staff absence rate up from 5.8% to 9.1% again. So that's nearly 1 in 10 members of staff suffering from COVID. And that would certainly be reflected in the data that I've seen from schools reporting this week, where staff cases seem to have increased quite significantly. So of course, that's having a huge impact on attendance, both pupil and staff, as I mentioned, and all of the relative knock-ons that has. Several schools have reported difficulty in accessing supply staff. They're either too busy, there aren't enough of them, or agencies just simply cannot keep up with the pace of having to fill places, which of course means that it generally then has a knock-on effect on SLT, because it's you guys that then do all of the covering and you stretch yourselves to do all the operational stuff rather than any of the strategic stuff. And I know that that's having an impact. And I would, as always, just suggest that you keep an eye on yourselves, that you look after each other and try not to get involved too much in all of that, so that you can keep yourselves safe as well. So lots of schools have been asking what they can do, and several have said, can we do anything? Well, the short answer to that is yes, of course you can. You are still expected to keep your outbreak management plan. And if you see, remember the guidance says a sudden increase in the numbers of cases or a significant change in the attendance, that you can implement some aspects of that outbreak management plan. And lots of you have called and talked to me about what it is that you need to do. So please feel free to do that. Please don't feel powerless. You can still do things that can mitigate the infection rates. Two main questions this week that we have been on the receiving end of are the questions around testing. Latest guidance, of course, is that all free testing comes to an end at the end of this month. So you will no longer be able to access your free tests. Schools, I would strongly suggest, should keep hold of any supplies that they have. Couple of reasons. One is if you do have an outbreak and we talk with you and recommend twice weekly testing of staff again, that you've got access to those quickly for staff. And secondly, if you have residentials or something along those lines that are coming up, and you may want to draw on those just to use with staff to make sure that everybody is safe prior to departure. The lack of testing, of course, is an issue for you. I know lots of people have spoken to me about it, what's going to happen when we don't know if people have actually got COVID or not. And just for your information, we do raise that with our conversations with DfE, so they are aware of it. I'm not sure they'll be able to do anything, but that's at least we're pushing it up the chain. And the other thing is about vaccinations for 5 to 11-year-olds. Still no information or guidance yet on when that's going to happen. The guidance still says that it's going to be spring 2022, which of course we're in already. And the only other thing to mention on that is that, of course, there's no expectation that anybody in schools will be involved in that process. It will be for parents and carers to plan that themselves with their children. So it's not gone, it's still there. Please speak to us if you need any help or advice and guidance. And soon, hopefully, as Mark mentions, it'll be something that we don't have to talk about quite so often.
Thanks so much, Martin. As always, if anybody's got any questions for Martin, they just put them in the chat and we'll either answer them online now or we'll ensure that an answer is sent out. So as always, a recording of this will be made available and all materials will be shared with sort of a group afterwards, both for delegates but also for our mailing list who can't make it today. So yeah, with huge thanks to Martin. As I say, any questions, do put them in the sort of chat. But what we'll do now is move on to our speech and language expert panel. So Christian's going to be chairing this and starting a question and answer session. So I think Christian's got some sort of questions up his sleeve that he'd like to put to the panel, but then we really would welcome questions from the whole community.
Sorry, Mark, I'm just going to say that actually we're going to try and stick to the plan, just because in terms of availability, we've got Roz actually to just give us a quick Living Well update before we move on to that expert panel.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Christian. So Roz, you're however long of fame.
Hello. Can you hear me this time?
We can.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, that's great. What a success already. I'm not going to put my video on because I don't want to jinx it. But it's just a really quick update on a couple of things from the Living Well schools. So I'm sure you're all aware of the NCMP programme. It's the National Childhood Measurement Programme, which happens in reception year 6. It's also going to include hearing screening. It's delivered by the 0 to 19 service. Just to let schools know, there's going to be a digital solution planned for start in September 22. So just wanted to highlight to you, they're working out the process and we'll share the details with you when we have them. It's planned to be more efficient and environmentally friendly, as they'd like to use email communication as far as possible, but with an awareness that this won't suit all children and families. So as I say, they're still working out exactly how it's going to work and taking best practice from other areas in the region, and we'll make sure that the details are shared with primary schools as soon as they're finalised. A couple of other things, Shared Spaces Research Project, which is around social cohesion. You may remember Shelley came and McHugh and Jones came and spoke to you last time. It's a survey for secondary school pupils aged 14 to 16. Will take around 30 to 40 minutes to complete, and pupils who take part will get a £10 voucher and schools get £500 for supporting it. It's to understand what influences whether young people choose to interact with people from different groups, with the hope of later informing policy and practice. It's going to fit very well in with one of the themes from the COVID Recovery Manifesto from young people around eradicating racism and discrimination in the city. And there's lots of different bits of work happening around tackling racism and discrimination in the city and in schools. I'm just bringing it again because there's been very little sign up. So if anybody would like to put anyone forward or their schools forward, that would be fantastic. I'll put Shelley's email address in the chat. There is some additional work happening on the Living Well Schools website to change how you can search for things to make it a bit more user friendly, from feedback we've had from some people who've been using it. So do continue to give us feedback because it's meant to be the best thing, the most useful thing for school staff. So do keep coming back to us. And lastly, a little later than planned, the first newsletter for Living Well Schools has been created by one of our apprentices we've had working with us. If you haven't signed up to receive the newsletter, please do email in to say you'd like to receive it. It's aiming to bring the most recent or relevant programmes to your attention within Living Well Schools, as well as highlighting appropriate news items that's happening in the district. Again, feedback is really useful because I want it to be helpful for school staff. Again, I'll put the email address to sign up for that in the chat. And that's me. Thank you, Chris and Mark.
Brilliant. Thanks, Roz. Excellent. Really excellent stuff. Yeah, such an exciting piece of work for Living Well Schools. Right, so now hopefully I'm back on the correct agenda, which is our Ask an Experts speech and language panel, with Christian starting sort of a questioning. I'm so really delighted to have a really excellent set of colleagues joining us on this sort of a panel. So we've got Philippa Degnan from a local authority. We've got Cecile de Cat and Lydia Gunning from the universities. We have Sean Hudson from St Edmunds and 50 Things. And then finally, we've got colleagues from the Nurture Trust. We've got Maria Boban, who's a Senko, and Neil Marshall, who's a SALT, a speech and language therapist. A really excellent collection of skills and expertise. So Christian, can I ask you to kick off the questioning, and then we'd really like everybody just to ask sort of questions, make sort of comments, so we can start a really healthy conversation. And the idea is that we will then segue into our breakout groups, where we're going to ask every group to come up with their 3 most important things that they think we need to do to improve speech and language outcomes across the district. So there will be an opportunity for everybody to have a very fruitful conversation. But first of all, let's hear from our experts. Over to you, Christian.
Okay, so just I'm going to ask people to prepare themselves in about 25 minutes or something like that. Once we've had the question and answer session, just to make sure that everybody knows they're going to be going into breakout spaces. We have quite a lot of colleagues, I think, who listen into the conversation, and they're whilst they're doing a few bits of other things, hence the screens being off sometimes. But we do really need you to go into those breakout spaces after we've had our question and answer session. I've had a number of questions that have already been sent into our expert panel, and I'm going to go straight over to the colleagues from Nurture Trust. Really interesting model that they were able to talk about this evening, which is using a speech and language therapist and having one of those in a primary school as part of the Nurture Trust offer. I think we're really interested in your perspective, clinical perspective as a speech and language therapist, but also your perspective really on the impact of the pandemic and what that's had around presenting need in primary schools. And there was another question I got, which is around the difference that using a speech and language therapist is making in your schools. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to whoever wants to speak first at Nurture Trust, and I'm promising to also enable whoever would like to from that team to screen share.
So, Christian, I'll speak first, just as a second introduction,
okay,
really. And if you could screen share for Maria, that would be really good. I'm not sure, just to say, I'm not sure I briefed Neil and Maria that they were going to get grilled as a panel, but I'm sure that they'll kick me later and do the best that they can at that point. We've been working with Assault on site regularly at LePage for a number of years, and our Assault is Neil Marshall, who also works at a number of our other Nurture schools. Christian told me that Ruth Dennis suggested that LePage did a presentation, as she was aware that we already work with Assault on site, and this was a desirable model. With the massive increase of children with high needs arriving in EYFS, undiagnosed and without support, this has been even more invaluable. And recently, I had to attend a potentially contentious annual review where Neil was present, and I have to say that the external professional opinion that he's able to provide was absolutely vital in ensuring a good outcome. So Mario Mabine, Arsenko and Neil Marshall will now do a presentation. So Mario, are you good to go?
Yep, I'm just looking if I can share my screen. Yep.
You should be able to.
Yep.
Perfect.
Right, okay, great. Okay, Neil, have you got your camera on?
My camera's on, yeah.
Right, okay, that's fine, right.
You should be able to hear me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course you can. You replied to me. So.
Right, okay, well, hello everybody. It's great to be here with you all. Myself and Neil have prepared this brief presentation just to give you an insight into speech and language therapy at LePage. So you've got myself, I'm the SEN coordinator at LePage, and Neil Marshall is our commissioned speech and language therapist. So yeah, Neil, do you want to do a little introduction about yourself?
Yeah. So LePage, I'm part of the Nurture Trust. I'm the speech and language therapist that happens to be in several of the Nurture Trust schools. And there are some schools that have commissioned within the Nurture Trust for quite a while, and there's some that are quite new to commissioning. So they're all individually on their own journeys, but joined up in that as a large speech, language and communication approach. And within the school context, I am there to support parents, staff, and to work alongside the children as well. and the schools that I'm in within the Nurture Trust are very individual in their own respects as well. So the school we'll be talking about today will be obviously Le Page.
Okay, so just to give you a little insight, and in case you don't know what Neil looked like, because I can't see him on screen, that's him. So as in our school we have 684 pupils at present. We are quite a large school, so we're a 3-form school in Barker End. Quite a large proportion of our children who have special needs have speech, language and communication needs as their primary area of need. And so in order to meet that need, we have commissioned a therapist for around 7 years now. And it has been quite some time, but we've seen the impact of that. And what's worked really well is having Neil as our therapist for 5 out of 7 of those years. And so he's able to see those children through and develop relationships with the children and their families and with staff as well. And it supports transition as well through the years as well. So having that one speech and language therapist has a real positive impact. And it's really helped us to meet the needs of those children.
Yeah, and I think as well in terms of working in Le Page, the one good thing about working in Le Page from a kind of working in the community point of view is that I'm a familiar face within the school, and the school has a very high proportion of children that are bilingual, trilingual, and have a lot of different communities, and just having that stepping outside of speech and language, having that awareness of kind of the community and the different community structures as well is a real positive within the school as well.
Yeah, that works really well for us because Neil is seen as part of the school community, but at the same time when we need, it can be quite strategic, because when we need you to deliver a message that comes from a different sort of a different service, that you're an outside agency, sometimes it, you know, when we're working with parents to help them to understand or process something, often it can be seen that, oh well, school is just saying this, but Neil coming from a different background can help, and that collaborative approach, like Dick mentioned earlier, that you know, as an outside agency coming in and having being on the same page as school, trying to support the family can be quite progressive too. So yeah. So we thought the way to do this was we were planning how to present this, and we thought we'd talk about pre-COVID days, you know, trying to remember what they used to look like, and then the challenges we faced during the lockdown, and then post-COVID as well, and living with COVID right now, so what the situation is like, and putting it into context for our school, and I'm sure it's the case for many schools. So prior to COVID, we had you know, lots of things were in place, you know, lots of systems were running quite smooth and quite efficiently. We had children were quickly supported. Most of the children, I'd say, had access straight away to speech and language provision, because while the need was high, lots of things were already in place. So any new children or any needs that became more significant or more apparent, we could support. We had the flexibility and the capacity to do that. You know, Neil was able to work and develop a therapy or bespoke interventions to support those children with their language and their processing, their understanding, that could then be translated to the classroom as well and to the home. So working with those parents, it's quite easy to be able to catch a parent or sit with the parent and, you know, talk to them about their child, invite them in, and look at go do a home visit if we needed to, and just see what the situation was like. And just being able to do face-to-face assessments of children, and just share those concerns and that advice, and that was sort of how things were running, just at that normal pace.
Yeah, and it was just the simple things of being able to be out in the playground and catch parents as they're picking up their children, to discuss any new therapy techniques, even pass on resources to them in the playground. Just something as simple as, you know, we've got these concerns, or parents started to actually come to me and say, I've got these concerns about my child because I've seen this in another child you've seen. Can I discuss those with you? So I was actually almost bypassing the referral process because they were coming to me. And it just meant that if therapy was more timely, and again it was that developing those trusts and that relationship with both the school and the parents, and it was just like a normal pre-COVID therapy service, but I was in the school and I had better and quicker access to parents, children, teachers, all of the above.
Yeah, it was generally quite common knowledge that Thursday was the speech and language day, and that's what parents knew. So they knew Neil was going to be in on a Thursday. They'd come in, they'd be knocking on the door. Could we have a quick chat, Mr. Marshall, as they did the pick and drop offs? And so those sorts of systems were running quite smooth. But obviously during the lockdown, a lot of that was difficult to achieve, and we did have a lot of challenges. Just the focus of the support that was being delivered had to change. It wasn't, if we couldn't deliver those bespoke interventions. We found that lots of parents had a delay in accessing services, so needs increased during lockdown, but at the same time there was a delay in how quickly they could access that service. Neil was no longer here, on a Thursday. Lots of us working from home, that kind of access wasn't available and ready. But during lockdown, Neil and I worked quite closely in terms of providing remote support. And even though we did try to be flexible and contact parents and have video calls, but that in itself was a challenge too, especially with some of our families having quite limited access to technology. Parents were more focused on the health, rightly so. They were more focused on catching COVID and the worries and anxieties around COVID than they were necessarily about their child's speech and language. And so they were very protective over certain factors and not as much about other areas. And so the focus did shift slightly. So there were quite a few challenges that existed during the lockdown.
Yeah, and a lot of the issues that we faced, kind of trying to work remotely, working with parents, within the page specifically, they're quite common to the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists during and beyond COVID report. The Building Back Better, just that there was issues with the kind of social mobility, with parents often not having the equipment, having difficulties establishing the equipment, even the anxieties, like Mary said, around the anxieties around COVID, and parents were often on furlough, and there was a lot of other things that seemed from parents' eyes to take precedence. So a lot of the time was spent about trying to understand how important the kind of speech and language communication development was with parents, and making sure that they were supported as best as they could. And obviously during that time as well, a lot of parents, especially those children with SCN, special educational needs, suddenly parents started to realize that their children were maybe struggling a bit more with their learning than they previously anticipated. But still, despite that, they weren't necessarily making the links that it's possibly a speech and language and communication issue that was part of that bigger picture of their learning. And so again, we spent a lot of time just trying to help parents. And sometimes just the physical issues of parents sometimes don't have broadband, they don't have appropriate equipment. The page is in itself in one of the highest deprived areas of Bradford. So a lot of parents were having financial worries and additional worries on top of their own children's educational needs, really.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Even when delivering that support as well, because you would often find that there were siblings or children or other family members in the same room, so parents weren't always having direct conversations, or there was a bit of things that could be quite confidential or could be said in a different way in a face-to-face context was not really happening. So we had to be quite aware of the surroundings too, and it was hard to control those external factors. So was all these were issues that were quite prevalent. And then as the lockdown lifted and we had children returning to school in bubbles, there was a definite shift in back of priority again. So we had to focus on what was important. So we looked at the first thing was obviously establishing those needs of those children, and a lot of needs have increased. And like in the previous slide, it said that there were delays in accessing services between health or social care or education or whatever. So we've had children coming to us who had never been to another setting before and had come to our setting for the first time, but had not been seen by health visitors, had not been seen by GPs or paediatricians, or waiting lists have just been that long. So it's been trying to identify those needs, and then supporting staff to meet those needs. And a lot of the focus has been around early years, because we're finding that children coming to us who are 3-4 years old, never been to any of the setting, do have quite high levels of speech, language and communication needs. And so it's sort of working on those and prioritizing those children, their provision in the earlier setting, and communicating their needs with parents and carers, because most of them will be hearing it for the first time at school. So that relationship is so important, that Neil mentioned earlier, that you build that relationship with myself as a Senko, with Neil as a speech therapist, with any of the services, and then to be able to say that, they need to be able to trust you, because if you're telling a parent that your child has traits of autism, or has a social communication disorder, or has quite significant speech and language needs, that's a lot for a parent to take, especially if it's the first time, and if they've just thought, that's okay, that's my child, and it's just COVID, it's just they've never been anywhere, they've never seen any of the child, and we've just kept them at home. So it's been really important to establish that and know when it's the right time to speak to these families. The best thing about Neil working in school and having him commissioned for a day a week is the fact that if you were to refer him to the core service, it'd take around 18 weeks for that support to be put into place. But the fact that Neil is here, we can be flexible in terms of, this case is taking priority, so can we work on this child and the needs, and let's respond to this before we get onto this other child. But it's quite timely and quite efficient, which is the best thing, really.
Yeah, I mean, like most service in speech and language, we've seen a high number of children that have been waiting on caseloads maybe longer than they would have done pre-COVID, and as well, what has happened as a picture in my service is sometimes we've been triaging children in our service as red, amber, green, or purple if they're significant high need. And children that have initially been triaged as green have come into LePage, where actually when we've seen them, the need is much higher than what maybe the conversations they've had with parents before, because a lot of the triaging that we've done is done on discussion with parents. So we're relying an awful lot on parents' understanding of their own child's needs, and what they're doing is interpreting the child's needs rather than the child actually making their needs known, for example. And again, a lot of what I've noticed from September, since the lockdowns have really eased and things, and we're starting to go back to normal, is it's a lot more about parent education again, and making them understand their children's needs, and putting that timely support into place, especially for the early years. There's been quite a shift in difference, whereas before I would have a fairly even number of children across different year groups with a slight lean towards early years, whereas this time the lean has gone almost entirely towards early years, because a lot of children are coming through who have maybe had delayed 2.5-year checks, 2-year checks with their health visitors. Like Mary said, they hadn't had their needs identified, and they haven't had those onward referrals to paediatricians. They haven't had that early input from their previous services. So I'm kind of almost going in there straight away and doing all those referrals that normally would have happened a year, maybe 18 months earlier, getting that support in place, and also making sure that the staff are aware of the specialist approaches, such as like intensive interaction, and using like objects and supporting like the transitional supporting classes. And again, focusing going forward, me and Mary are going to look at kind of putting an intensive interaction training package together for all the early years to support those staff. And it's just, again, playing catch up, just like a lot of other services, and making sure that the children's needs are met in the school ASAP, really. Excuse me.
So how this fits into the whole school context is the assess, plan, do, review cycle, really. It's the fact that we have this external service involved, and we have those regular discussions. It's the communication is there between us, and then we can then deliver that support across school and where it is needed the most. The observations, the assessments, the discussions with staff and parents all form part of the assess cycle. We plan, we put the advice and targets together. We'll work directly with staff. We'll talk to them about what the targets are for those children, and we can communicate that with those parents now, and be able to invite them into school, show them what has been done or what has been agreed, have those conversations. we are able to implement that advice at school and at home and have those ongoing conversations. And then we're able to do the review. And whether that's just a regular review, whether that's a fortnightly review where it's a phone call to the parent, or it's calling them in just for a check, or it's just or it's the My Support Plan review, or it's a annual review meeting, you know, depending on the need of that child and where we are at. We're able to then look at the advice and the targets and what's been implemented, what's worked really well, and staff have been able to bring in like photos and videos and children's, you know, evidence or learning journeys or whatever else there is, and to be able to talk about you know, what's worked well for that child, and it's celebrating those small successes, but then also moving them on to, so what is next now, and because Neil is here and he's available and he's part of those conversations and those meetings, it's a case of, right, okay, so we can see this child's made this progress, let's move them on to the next level now. So learning is, you know, we're not having to wait again. Normally they might be discharged from a service, but actually no, they're still here, they're still part of our school, and it's not you know, a clinical medical thing where they just discharge and that's it, done. We can review, we can go back to that, and that has the biggest impact.
Yeah, because in the NHS service we work on what's called an episodes of care model. So we would provide some input, we provide the advice and the recommendations, and then we would kind of tie that package and say, right, when these targets have been met, make another re-referral, and we can review those, the next steps. But obviously when that re-referral is made, it goes back into the referrals and you've got that long wait again. Whereas my caseload is more in the school, although I'm working in the NHS, my caseload and the children that are priority for the school is my caseload, rather than I get a caseload that just comes to me. The school with myself dictate which children are high priority, and that's how we prioritize in the school. So it's often sometimes needs led, it's sometimes actually we need to provide additional support for this child in terms of having those discussions and gathering that evidence about kind of transitions to high school, especially if that transition means a transition where we think a more specialist provision is needed. And it also means that I can maintain a caseload over a longer period of time than maybe you would see in our clinic service, because again, it's dictated really from the school in that respect.
Oh, okay. What I'm going to do now is, because we've got a number of different people contributing, I'm going to say thank you to the team from the Nurture Trust. And I'm going to just, if you can stop screen sharing now, and I'm going to really useful perspective brought in from an innovative but really impactful approach being used by one primary school, and thanks to I've just spoken. I'm just going to reach out to Hannah from CAER. Really, there's some interesting data around the impact that the lockdown has had from a school's perspective on speech and language presenting need. Do you have a sense from the academic work that you've been involved in around the picture of the impact of the pandemic on speech and language?
Well, of course, in the EQUAL project, we're looking at children who were in reception and then in year one. So we were looking at their progress against the early years foundation stage profile goals in 4 areas, and one of them was communication and language. So we have some information from schools across Leeds about the provision, remote learning provision for communication and language, and then how that provision impacted children's development. So can I share just a couple of slides about some of the key findings that we pulled out from our bigger report? So, of course, in our report, we were focusing not just on communication and language, but looking at literacy, maths, and personal, social, emotional development. But just to share a few things that we did see coming out of the data in terms of communication and language. So we saw that schools tended to provide fewer resources for communication and language compared to other areas. That both schools and caregivers told us that they spent less time on communication and language. So this is a group of children, about 450 children. Some of them have special needs, lots of them don't. So they're a really mixed bag that we were working with. So fewer resources, they're spending less time on communication and language. Communication and language activities tended to be built into other areas of the curriculum. So schools reported less specific resources for those areas. In terms of the progress that children made, we saw across the board that children made less progress than you would expect. Worryingly, there were a large group of children that didn't make any progress against the goals, including communication and language. When we went back to collect some more data when the children were at the end of year 1, we found again that they had made progress. So they made a bit more progress during that second round of closures, but lots of them were still working either at reception level or below across those early years foundation stage goals. And actually what we saw across the second period of closures was something that we hadn't seen in the first. We saw that children were making less progress in communication and language than, say, in things like literacy and maths. And I think that ties into the fewer resources and the less time spent on learning in that area. We also were really interested in what predicted children's growth. So I think there are a couple of things, there's probably lots of things in this complicated diagram that people might find interesting. But so on the one side, we have children's progress sort of covering the first lockdown period. On the other side, it's the second lockdown period. Anything that's at the top next to the image of the child, they're sort of children related variables, so things to do with the child. Anything next to the picture of the school are things more to do with what the school provided. In green, we have things that were positive, and in red, we have things that were less positive, so associated with less progress. So I think in terms of what might be interesting to this group is that we saw across both time periods that children with recognised special educational needs made less progress. We saw that children who have English as an additional language made less progress as time went on, so they made less progress during that second period. Looking at what the school provided, the more resources it provided, better children did. If they provided new activities too often, that wasn't good for progress. And also families' ability to engage in home learning. So we asked teachers to tell us how well families could engage in home learning, and that estimate was really associated with children's progress. So those children who were able to engage in home learning made more progress. So that's all I have to say, but if anyone's interested in reading a bit more about the ICL project, they can check out the website where we've also got an animation. So if you don't want to read the reports, you can always just watch the sort of 3-minute animated video. So I hope that was helpful. That's from sort of the research perspective, Christian.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Okay, so and the links around the ICL project are within the chat. If there's anybody else got some questions that they want to ask us, please throw them in there. A lot of focus this evening on early years. I'm going to reach out to Sian now. Question come through is that St Edmunds serves a highly disadvantaged community. Plenty of children arrive at below age-related in speech and language at age 2 and 3. How does St Edmunds give the right speech and language support to children who need it, Sian?
Hi everybody, nice to be here. Okay, so as a maintained nursery school in an area of significant deprivation, lots of our children come to us well below where we would hope that other children of this age would be. So always over 50%, sometimes as high as 60–70% of our children are attaining at baseline well below age related. So that can be 12 months plus for a 3-year-old. So it is a lot. So in the past, we have tried to use interventions to support these children. And because there were so many of them, it was really, really difficult, and it resulted in a little bit of support for a lot of children. Since then, we now know, research has told us that of that group, so of the group of children who are 12 months plus behind with their speech, language and communication, 70% of those children are very likely to catch up at some point. So it might happen when they're 3, it might happen when they're 4, or maybe not till they're 7. But at some point, as long as they're given a really good support and they're educated in a good or outstanding early years setting or a school, that they will catch up. So For those 30% of children, they're the ones that we need to focus on, because they're the children who, in addition to the significant delays in speech and language, they've got other things that are affecting their development and learning. So we now have a much smaller group that we call our priority children. And they also have low wellbeing and involvement most of the time. And they also have difficult home circumstances. So ACEs, social care involvement, something that's happening that is really difficult for them and their family at home, which is making it really hard for them to make progress in all their learning, but particularly in their speech and language. So we support these children really much more intensively. That's how we go about it now, and that's what we found really works. So they have a key person who spends one-to-one time with them every single session. We need to make sure that their attendance is good, so we need to work with families on that. And we have specific support for those children. So it's not one intervention fits all. So we tailor the support to that child, but it always includes some one-to-one support that happens every single session. That's really important. Also, though, those children receive support from all the other adults. So that's including me as head teacher. I know who these children are. It's including our parental involvement workers, everybody, the caretaker, the lunchtime supervisors, everybody knows these children really well. And what we do is we support them in lots of different ways. So it might be a quick story, it might be a chat, somebody from their room will bring them up to get some resources from the cupboard, and on the way they'll be talking to them. So it's not anything that's really difficult to do. It's just that if it happens a lot, what we've seen is that it has a really significant impact for those children. They also have priority in all the lovely activities that we offer to all our children. So making Play-Doh, for example, it's okay if a priority child gets to make Play-Doh every time. That's all right. We don't worry about it not being fair for everybody, because what we know is really important, that life's not fair, and some children, in order to be given those equal opportunities in life, need to be given extra support. So that's what we do. It was a bit difficult for our staff to understand when we first started it a few years ago, but the more we talk about it and the more we work with these children and these families in this way, the more they are on board. Everybody understands it fully now. So each of these children have an individual plan, and we add to that plan. We have specific support that we give them, but every time I read a story or a child comes to my office and has a little chat with me about the packet of crisps that they're eating or whatever they're doing, then I will make a record of that on their personal plan, so that then we have lots and lots of just a little quick day and what's happened, quick chat or a story. Then we have lots and lots of those pieces, little bits of information recorded, and they add up to make sure that we're giving those children the support that they need. And then what we do is we evaluate it on half-termly basis to make sure that the things that we're doing are working for those children. And what we've found is that they do work. All our lovely children that come to our nursery schools have a really good support for their speech language. It's not just the priority children. We do lots of activities, lots of additional things, lots of support for families. But what we've found is that if those priority children receive the support from everybody, then that's what can make a real difference to them and support them in all those different ways to enable them to succeed in life, really.
Thank you, Sean. There's a real theme coming through in terms of the presentations around early years here, although we've got a couple of contributions later on which are very much looking at the secondary space as well. I'm going to reach out to Philippa from Bradford Metropolitan District Council, and there's a question here about a lot of noises and a lot of conversations about the development of a speech and language pathway, and a lot of concern from schools about the levels of presenting need, particularly for younger children. Are you able to tell us more about the plans that Bradford Council have got around the speech and language pathway, particularly for Bradford's youngest children?
Hi, Christine, can you hear me?
I can. Yes, everybody else
Oh,
can.
brilliant. I lost connection during the LePage presentation, so I'm just a bit worried about my connection today. If you could you possibly put that presentation up for me, Christian? I'm having an absolute nightmare with my computer.
Let me try. If you just want to just introduce it, and I'll just go and get it now. Okay, that's fine.
Oh, thank you. So yes, we as part of the council and public health, we are looking towards building a speech and language pathway for birth to 5 across the district. We've been given some money by the council themselves to put in towards this pathway to support children's development in terms of language development, and really luckily we have our partners in public health who have decided to come in with the joint commissioning as part of the pathway, so which is great. We are early in the pathway. We're trying to build it properly so that it's sustainable, and we're just beginning to talk to our partners across the district in supporting the process. So, as you know, we've talked about this many times.
I'm just going to say that the presentation's on screen. Are you able to see it?
Yes, I can. Yeah,
okay,
thank
that's
you.
Fine. Just tell me when you want to move on. Sorry.
Yep, that's great. So we've talked about this previously on this group as well as today, that we know that many of our children, up to 50% of our children in disadvantaged areas do enter school with a speech and language difficulty. And actually many of our children's communication needs can be preventable. And just as Sian has just said, in a good quality learning environment, we can focus on this, and we can help them become much better in terms of their communication skills before they start school, which is why we're really focusing obviously on this around from birth to 5. So and that, which is why across Bradford, for some time now, we've been saying that we really do need a speech and language pathway, but we're all partners, as part of that, fundamental to the plan. So if you just move on for me, Christian. Thank you. So we know that the benefits of a speech and language pathway means that we will be able to identify children's needs, we'll be able to make sure that children don't fall behind. We need to make sure that communication is everybody's business who works with children, including parents and all different agencies. And having those joined up services is really key to making it successful. And it will inform everyone about about how we work together to make sure that we make sure no child falls behind. So the next slide, please, Christian. So as part of that, we want to build in the public health who are identified as part of making the joined up services. But it's we look at the whole population, and we're going to commission together specialist services so that will benefit the children in moving forward. And we want to make sure that it begins in pregnancy. So really, it's a 0 to 5 pathway. And that we educate and we inform the parents of our youngest children at every stage as well, which is really important. That because the children spend most of the time in their home, and so we want to enable them to to help build their child's communication and language, and know how important it is that they play a huge part in that, because they are their first educators. Next one, please, Christine. So this is early doors, and this is just a little bit of a make-up I put together, but we want the pathway to be available universally to all children. So we know that not all children need specialist services, but we do want a universal offer that enables all children to have access to skilled, confident staff who it's the first quality teaching, around helping support children to be at the right stages throughout their education. And then there'll be some periods where children will need targeted support and interventions within their early years. But then also there'll be a few children who will require the specialist services. And as we know at the moment, our specialist services like speech and language are really, really, the numbers of referrals have dramatically increased. And we know that we need to, really help support that process within, a universal offer. So it's really, really important that we identify everybody who is able to support in this pathway. And I think this is the last one. Next one. So here we are. This is us at the moment in terms of the pathway. We're on step 1, where we're engaging and identifying our stakeholders. So we're building local engagement. So we're working with Better Start, we're working with health visitors, like I say, public health, the library service. We're just in early doors of getting everybody to be informed, and some people will be more involved in the process. But we want everybody including our family hubs. And so there's a long list there, and I'm sure there's many more stakeholders who will be as part of the process. So watch this space. If you do want to be involved and you haven't contacted you so far, please do contact me. Like I say, it's early doors. We are in our first steps, but we want to get it right, and we will definitely be building it, not just for the next 5 years. We're hoping this is going to be a permanent plan for our children in Bradford.
Thank you, Philippa. Are you okay with me sharing your contact details into the chat, or perhaps you can do that for anybody who wants to join that consultation and that kind of like design stage? That would be great. We are doing reasonably well at sticking to time here. I've got 2 final questions before we go into breakout spaces, and a reminder that you are going to do that. We've a question to Cecile, which is around the current picture around bilingual and EAL pupils, and also to Lydia, a very secondary specific question around how, as a non-specialist teacher, you can get a sense of children's reading ages at secondary. So I'm going to hand over to those 2 colleagues in whichever order they choose for those particular contributions.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first if I can just share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so in regards to kind of reading abilities in schools, so there are already a number of ways that we can assess children's reading comprehension, and this is done kind of throughout a child's schooling. And we can use reading assessments to identify whether children are working at or below the expected standard, what would be expected of them. What isn't necessarily clear though is how Bradford schools can assess children's reading abilities at the moment. So there's a variety of different assessment tools that are already in distribution. So we don't know which tests Bradford secondary schools tend to be using. We don't know how they're interpreting the results. Are they using percentiles? Are they using standard scores? And how they then use the information that they gather from these reading assessments. So what do they put in place? Who are they targeting? What is their cutoff point for the children that they can help and the children that they need to support? How are they supporting these children? So we're actually conducting a 3-minute survey at the moment with Bradford secondary schools to kind of ascertain a little bit more information, looking at all these things so we can provide schools with guidance on what other schools in the area are using, and maybe if they can more effectively or more efficiently use the data that they are already gathering because they're already using these kind of assessments. But of course, so much of kind of reading proficiency depends on general language performance. So another project that Cecilia and I are currently working on is looking at assessing English proficiency in secondary schools at Key Stage 3 again. So we're currently recruiting Bradford secondary schools, where we're working on one at the moment, but we're looking to have kind of a wider pool of data. And the measures that we're employing look at English oracy, reading difficulties, and English as an additional language versus English as a first language. I know that Cecile's going to talk a little bit in a while about how we're not expecting to look at these as binary variables though. So it's more like on a continuum. So my email address is there. It's a bit of a shameless plug, but if you are from a school or know of a school that might be interested in working with us on this, do pop me an email. There's a QR code there too. But I think that's it for me. It was very kind of hopefully short and sweet. And I don't know whether Cecile would want to
share. You can stop sharing and
anything.
Yeah, thanks. Great, thank you so much. So very, very quickly from me, a little snapshot about the EL pupils. So the main question, of course, is, we know that EL pupils are not, uniform. There's a lot of variability between them. And the main question for schools, of course, is, who needs support? Because they don't all need support. The question is, have they caught up with their monolingual peers for the age where they're at? So in terms of daily language, the expectation is that EL kids should have caught up with their peers by the time they reach Key Stage 2. Of course, that will depend on how much experience with English they've had over their lifetime. But in terms of academic language, most of them are likely to need continued support throughout primary school, and some of them for longer than that. New arrivals, of course, pose a very special set of challenges. Some of them might have had lots of gaps in formal education if they join somewhere along the path. Some of them might not even have literacy training or literacy in their home language, so it's important to know a bit about their background. And then there's the issue of home language maintenance, which often isn't looked at by schools, but we know that it's associated with well-being and it can provide foundations for English proficiency. So I'll come back to that when I give you some resources at the end. So just two quick slides here from me. One is about a new tool that we've developed to help you easily get a profile for your EL kids in terms of their experience with English and the home language, their literacy and proficiency in the home language, which is normally not possible to assess within schools, just so that you see where are they at and what should your expectations be. You might be interested in helping us look at how to optimize the report produced by this tool to meet your needs, in which case just get in touch. The website address is there, either to start using the tool or to get involved in whichever way. And I'll finish by just pointing to some really excellent resources. So you will be, I guess, familiar with NALDIC, the National Subject Association for EL. They have an absolutely fantastic quarterly journal that is full of research supported guidance and wonderful resources. And the two books that you see there on the screen, they're quite recent. They're both really wonderful, full of evidence-informed strategies. The first one is about embedding home language in learning at primary school. Really fantastic, the results that they got out of that. So I will recommend it. And the other one is about achieving greater equity for all. So it does look at EAL, but it also looks at the broader issue of ethnicity, looks at SEND, social class, gender, etc. So both really wonderful reads that I warmly recommend, and I'll stop sharing. There you go, that's it for us.
That is wonderful. Thank you, Cecile. Thank you to all the presenters. Such an informative session and so much food for thought. And we'd really like to people now to hold that sort of a thought and take it into the breakout rooms. We really want to have some specific thought about what we could and should be doing in the district in order to tackle issues related to speech and language. So Lucy is about to press the magic button, which will put everybody into their breakout room. We do have rapporteurs in each of those rooms who will capture the conversations, but please can every group really start identifying 3 priorities, because we will then act upon them. So thank you again to all the presenters, brilliant stuff. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that Hannah was joining us. So it's a great pleasure to have my